Hey everyone, CJ here. Finally, I'm getting around to covering Avatar The Last Airbender related topic. Now, I'm going to talk about something that really fascinates me. Zuko's redemption and the series ending. Zuko's redemption is often considered to be one of the most successful storytelling in recent popular media. It's become the talking point of a lot of YouTube channels, and some writers' blogs even considered it to be the best redemption arc in television history. But have you ever wondered, for a show that's so inspired by Asian themes, does Zuko's redemption make sense from Confucian, Buddhist and Taoist perspective? In this episode, I am going to evaluate his redemption based on those philosophies, and how the ending would have been told differently if it is written from those philosophical perspectives. Obviously, there is going to be plenty of spoilers here. But before that, have you ever wondered whether people in Japan and China like Avatar The Last Airbender? I will answer this question first, because it will provide us with the right context. Avatar The Last Airbender has a massive following in the Anglophone region. Lots of people remember fondly of this modern classic, and it remained relevant up until today. But in Japan and China, it is just not that popular. They don't think that it is bad. Actually, if you look at the stars in the Japanese anime ranking site, Anikore, you can see that it's got quite a good score. Season 1 has 4.1 out of 5 stars. But only 6 people bothered to rate it. In comparison, the Dragon Ball series have 4 stars, but 892 people had rated it. And Naruto has 3.9 stars. It has also been rated by 1,030 people. These numbers means that a small group of people really liked Avatar, but it didn't really catch the general public's interest. I read somewhere online that Avatar was cancelled on its second season in Japan when it was being aired a long time ago, but it should be available in Japan now on video streaming sites like Netflix. As for China, you can see similar result. You can watch Avatar on Bilibili, the equivalent of YouTube there. It's got a really high score of 9.8 out of 10. But if you compare it to other animated series such as Naruto or Demon Slayer, you can see that it's got a much smaller following. Just over 1,000 people rated it, compared to over 380,000 for Demon Slayer. So why is that? The answer is quite complicated. But I think this reviewer's comments on Douban get pretty close to the heart of the issue. I am paraphrasing this, but this is the general gist. The show's package, as in the costume, architecture and martial arts etc., are Chinese inspired. They have done a very good job with the designs, and C-Run has done a great series talking about the cultural inspiration on the visual designs of Avatar. The design team had really done their research, but in its core, it is still a Western show, as demonstrated by the characters' personality, dialogue and action. Despite that, this reviewer still liked the show. Sokka is funny, the characters are likable, and the animation is fluid. 5 stars. So if you're a writer or a content creator, the next thing I'm going to say is going to be really important to you. This is my theory why even a really good work might not become popular. Avatar is not popular in Asia despite it being such a good show is because of cultural uncanny valley. This is a term I invented. Uncanny valley is a phenomenon where an object would be considered more likable the more it resembled a human, especially in the case of robots. But there is a massive dip in the likability the closer it resembled a human, until it goes back up. Some people have theorized that the cause of this is because the closer an object resembles a human, the more we can appreciate the craftsmanship. But once the resemblance goes over a certain point, our perspective switches and sees it as a defective or a fake human instead. In short, it is a betrayal of an established expectation. The thing about Avatar is that it did too great a job in its design and production. So much so that some Asian viewers are expecting the characters to behave like characters from Asian period dramas. So that's why, when the cast of Avatar behaved like modern American children, they are weirded out by the incongruency. It feels just like getting served sushi in an ice cream shop. They are both great food, it is just that you don't go to an ice cream shop to get sushi. This cultural uncanny valley can also happen between Asian countries, because Japanese-made manga and anime series like Kingdom which is based on the Chinese Qin Dynasty, is tremendously popular in Japan but received lukewarm response in China. Conversely, the popular Chinese mobile game Onmyoji, which is based on the Heian-era Japan, received lukewarm response in Japan because the content did not fit the usual expectations of the country of origin. I will talk about this more next time if you're interested. Comment below if you are. Look, I am not saying that Asian viewers need to have shows made to cater to their sensibilities. BoJack Horseman is very popular in China because they know what they are going to get with a show like this, and they can relate to his existential crisis in their own way. But in general, people belonging to certain cultures usually resonate more with themes that are more culturally relevant to them. But not all of them, of course, because younger audience may not understand all the intricacies of their own culture. I am sure that Asian kids would prefer to watch Tom and Jerry rather than Dream of the Red Chamber or Tale of the Heike. Anyway, I think that Avatar is really successful in Western countries because it is infused with a lot of Western themes and philosophies, despite the Asian exterior. Zuko's redemption, for example, has more of a Judeo-Christian worldview.
Evil and good are always at war inside you, Zuko. You alone can cleanse the sins of our family and the Fire Nation.
That's why it feels more relatable to Western audience. The happy ending and the resolution also feels more satisfying because it is the ideal Western ending, where the bad guy, Fire Lord Ozai, is put away and the main character, Aang, lived happily ever after, without having to compromise his principle of not taking life. For viewers living in a different culture, their satisfying resolution would usually fit their cultural and traditional framework better. So this is why I'm going to evaluate Zuko's redemption from a Chinese, Confucian, Buddhist and Taoist perspective. This is more of an experiment. How would the same story be told from a different cultural perspective? I think it would be really interesting to know how you feel about this if you are from a different culture. Would you have hated or liked the story better if it is told in this way? Okay, now let's start with a quick synopsis. In the first season of Avatar, Zuko started out as an ill-tempered villainous brat who was hell-bent on capturing the Avatar to regain his honor. But in the second season, we see him in the pits, scraping a living with his uncle Iroh. Here we start to see a gentler side of him, as he stole food for his uncle Iroh, saved villagers, and even let Team Avatar go to tend to his wounded uncle. His road to redemption is not linear either, because he betrayed Team Avatar again before finally joining them in the third and last season. But this idea of redemption is much more closely based on Christianity.
Evil and good are always at war inside you, Zuko. You alone can cleanse the sins of our family and the Fire Nation.
Evil and good is based on Christian dualism, and Zuko redeemed himself from the sins of his family and country, his original sin, by choosing his good self and switched to Team Avatar's side to defeat his father, fulfilling the Avatar's prophecy to bring balance. While in Chinese culture, prophecies aren't really a big thing. They usually have omens, which is quite different, and it is supposed to be quite vague and open to interpretation. Prophecies are more common among Buddhists, but it is more spiritual rather than politically messianic. In Orthodox Confucianism, humans are by nature good. Confucians believe that we have predisposition towards goodness, and it is up to us to cultivate our good nature. It is just that sometimes you are distracted from the path of good. So there shouldn't be a dilemma about good or evil here. Zuko, like everyone else, is good. He just had to work harder to develop his good nature. This principle was proposed by Mencius, a very important Confucian philosopher. It is the orthodox stance. Confucianism, or Ruism, is a living scholarly tradition that has various influential thinkers throughout history. New ideas don't automatically invalidate the old ones, and these thinkers may even disagree with each other. For example, Xunzi thought that human nature is evil. Look now, if I were to go through all their individual philosophies, then there would be no end to this video. So I will just talk about the general idea of Confucianism here. By the way, Confucianism is not incompatible with Christianity. Some Confucian scholars, like Xu Guangqi, even claim that Christianity can complement Confucianism. The Chinese word for repentance is 悔改, which is a compound word made up of regret, and change. So Zuko certainly have gone through the right steps towards Confucian repentance, because he regretted what he had done and changed for the better. He just did a really poor job of apologizing to Team Avatar, which is quite strange really, because if he is so obsessed with honor, then he would have known the correct ritual for apologizing. He should start the conversation on his knees. But this is just a small issue. Meritocracy is a very important part of Chinese culture. You don't earn redemption by just feeling sorry and changing your behavior. It has to be backed by action. 将功赎罪. Those who are repentant would compensate for their wrongdoing by merit. And Zuko compensating for his misdeeds by proposing to teach him firebending is a step towards the right direction. I don't use the word sin here because sin is usually used in Judeo-Christian context, and it means violating a universal law. But in Chinese philosophy, morality is not as clear-cut, and even in Confucianism, there are moral dilemmas. In the Analects, Confucius was once asked whether a son should report his father for stealing a sheep. Confucius replied that it is righteous for the father to not disclose his son's wrongdoing and vice versa. Conversely, when Socrates came across a son who was about to report his father for abusing and killing a slave, Socrates was more cryptic in his answer. He said that only a far wiser man than the person who asked the question could prosecute his father righteously. But then again, if you subscribe to Chinese legalist philosophy, then justice would have to come first. Just report the heck out of him. In general, Zuko's repentance is pretty acceptable in Confucian terms, but betraying his father is a massive no-no, especially when his father is also his lord. So that's a double whammy. Not only had he disregarded the ethics of filial piety, but he also betrayed his country. Obviously, covering for one's parents doesn't mean just letting him do whatever he wanted. Zuko should have taken an active part in reforming his father instead of just leaving him to the Avatar to deal with. If we were to tell the story in a satisfyingly Confucian way, the scenario would have been rewritten into something like this. Zuko would be the one who faced Fire Lord Ozai in the final episode. Zuko, who had been wanting his father's approval for all his life, defeats him and through filial piety reforms the father instead, by demonstrating to him the correct familial relationship. This is just like how the sage Sun reformed his family through filial piety. Then, maybe near the last moment, Azula decided to betray both of them and take the throne for herself. She stole Ozai's power and tried to kill her own father, thus turning her into a patricidal monster. So the final enemy Aang would have to fight would be Azula. And after defeating her, Ozai is given another chance to be a good father by guiding her to the right path. I am not saying that this would make it a better story, but this is the kind of story that would align more towards Confucian values. But how about you? What do you think? If you come from a different cultural background, do you think that this change is an improvement? Or does it make the story worse? I'm not saying that this kind of story would appeal to all Asians. It is just something that would be considered more period accurate to the ancient East Asian setting. Filial piety is considered to be the core of Confucian values. Other virtues stem out of it. That's why it is quite shocking to see Ozai in jail at the end of the original series. In China and Japan, there are plenty of cases of sons overthrowing their father, but no way would they ever put their fathers in jail. Usually, they would be put under house arrest, because if they were to kill their parents or treat them badly in the open, they would lose all their moral authority. Even Tang Taizong, the co-founder of the Tang Dynasty, who infamously killed his brothers and seized power by a bloody coup, had to keep up the act and periodically built his father a larger and grander palace to show to his ministers that he is a morally upright leader. In a historical Confucian setting, hardly any minister would accept Zuko as their lord if they saw him throwing his own father in jail. He would have lost all his moral authority. It is similar in Japan, such as in the case of the daimyo Takeda Shingen. When he seized power, he just sent his father to a Buddhist monastery. It is pretty common actually in East Asian countries to send unwanted royalty to a Buddhist temple, because the idea is that once they have been ordained, they would be considered as separate from society at large. So they can no longer meddle in political affairs and they had to stay celibate too. so they won't be producing any heir who would compete against the throne. And this segues us nicely to the topic of Buddhism. First, let me clarify that there are quite a few different branches of Buddhism: Mahayana, Theravada, Vajrayana, and the most popular branch in East Asia is Mahayana. But there are just so many different sects within Mahayana itself, I think it would be better if I just talk about it in generalities again. In Buddhism, life is considered as suffering. Their goal is to escape the samsara, the cycle of birth and rebirth, by attaining nirvana. Different sects have different interpretation of each of those elements, but the Buddhist sects in China have emphasized more on the virtues that are more relevant to the local sensibilities. For example, filial piety, which was considered to be kinda important in early Pali texts, became even more important in Chinese Buddhism. Also, merit, as in doing things that would result in good karma, is very important towards redemption. Helping the avatar would definitely count. Mahayana Buddhism became popular in China because it shares quite a few similar philosophical outlook with Confucianism. Even though confession is important in Buddhism, it is really just used to set the correct mindset. Zuko was really redeemed through his work helping the avatar. But just creating good karma does not make a typically Buddhist story. It is missing the classic Buddhist story trope of joining the monkhood. This is where Ang would say, 放下屠刀，立地成佛. This is a classic line they would say in Buddhist-themed fictions. It means drop your murderous weapon and become a Buddha. In Buddhist-themed fictions, a character would usually atone for his sin by joining the Sangha and renounce worldly desires. So I think, if we were to add more Buddhist themes in Avatar, I think it would be perfect for Aang to recruit Zuko as an air nomad monk. Zuko becoming the first generation of air nomad monk after his ancestors wiped them out would be karmic perfection. Unfortunately, it wouldn't work due to the magic system of the setting, because being a specific type of bender seemed to be determined by genetics. Only people descended from air nomads may become an airbender, and not even all members of the nation are born as benders. Now, this type of genetic magic goes very much against the principle of Kung Fu and martial arts. In Wuxia and Kung Fu fictions, martial arts is a democratizing factor, a meritocracy. Everyone can learn martial arts and become strong. That's why the female Kung Fu master archetype is very common in Wuxia literature. Sure, some people may be born with talent, but it only makes them faster learners. The point is, even if you are not too bright, if you work hard, you can catch up eventually. This is basically the stake of the main character of Jin Yong's Legend of the Condor Heroes novel. Cultivation is all about meritocracy. In folklores and classic novels such as Journey to the West, even animals can train and cultivate themselves to become immortals by working hard. Special power does not come from special birth, it comes through hard work, and that's the appeal of wuxia fiction. But let's leave this cultivation topic for another time. In a future episode, I will just talk more about wuxia and explain how cultivation works in terms of Brandon Sanderson's magic system. But for now, let's move on to Taoism. Taoism is a bit of a mess to define, really, because there are religious Taoism and philosophical Taoism. In ancient China, the division is quite thin. The Confucian scholars were quite ready to accept philosophical Taoism, but not the superstitious side of the religious Taoism. The general public, on the other hand, usually experienced Taoism through the lens of mysticism and magical practices. When the idea was introduced to the West, it was mostly gentrified, and the texts of Dao De Jing and Zhuangzi are given a lot of spotlight, even though the Taoist canon is made up of over 5,000 books covering various topics, with many more lost in history. Look, I can't cover all the different schools of Taoist philosophies and all the different religious sects either, so I will just limit it to the three most important Taoist classics: Dao De Jing, Zhuangzi, and Liezi. Liezi is very criminally overlooked in the West, so I have to include it here. In the Avatar series, the Avatar is supposed to bring balance to the world and keep the peace among the four nations. But this idea is the furthest thing you can get from Taoism. Historically, Taoism abhors politics. Chinese officials turn to Taoism to escape the pettiness of court politics. Tao is sometimes translated as the way, or it is known as the natural order of the world. The world doesn't need to be balanced by an avatar, it is already balanced. sages just need to live according to it. In Dao De Jing, there is a passage that says, "Heaven and earth do not act from any wish to be benevolent, as the dogs of grasses are dealt with. The sages do not act from benevolence, they deal with the people as the dogs of grasses are dealt with." Dao De Jing is more metaphysical and cryptic compared to the other two classics. In Zhuangzi and Liezi, a lot of the text is more concerned with what is useful and not useful from different perspectives. A tree that is unsuitable for lumber grows to be tall exactly because it is useless to the woodcutter. A goose that doesn't cackle is slaughtered first because it is useless to the owner. So in fact, it means that there is no objective truth and value. Meanings and worth change depending on circumstance and perspective. In Taoist-themed stories like Jin Yong's The Smiling Proud Wanderer, the line between good and evil is depicted to be non-existent. There are righteous people among the so-called evil sects, and there are also scheming hypocrites among the so-called righteous sects. If Zuko is a Taoist, then he would look into the nature of the conflict between the Avatar and his father. Even if his father is defeated, tyrants like him would appear again, most likely from another kingdom, and they will start all over again. Is this the natural state of the world? And the Avatar is just futilely trying to stop human nature? Or is the Avatar's intervention part of natural order of things? If the Avatar is the force of nature, then would there even be a need for him to do anything? Nature, just as the Tao, will take its course regardless. One way of dealing with this is to just take himself out of the equation, leave and not interrupt what is inevitable. This is a form of Wu Wei, or action through inaction. But philosophical Taoism is not just about doing nothing. In the Book of Liezi, the hedonist Taoist philosopher Yang Zu infamously declared that he would not sacrifice a single hair on his body to save the world. First of all, the world is not going to be saved by a single hair on his body. Even if the world can be saved by one hair, then how about using his skin to save it? Then how about his limbs? How far would you go to save the world? The point is, Taoists should know the cause and effects of their action, the price they have to pay for their action, and decide for themselves the amount of responsibility one should burden oneself with. If Zuko is a Taoist hero, then he would be pretty close to something like Uncle Iroh. So if he decided to help the Avatar, he would probably just leave after the job is done and goes in search of his mother. Once he found her, he would just probably live in seclusion somewhere, find a wife, and live happily ever after. Maybe this would not feel satisfying to the viewers, but from his perspective, he would have found true liberation from the chains of honor and responsibility, and finally get to decide to live his life on his own terms rather than other people's expectations. So what do you think? If you come from a culture where these philosophies are foreign, do you feel that any of these alternate endings resonate with you? Or do you prefer the original ending? Let us know in the comment section below. Anyway, if you like this kind of cool history, then subscribe to the channel, because there are a lot more cool contents coming up. By the way, before I go, I would like to thank Eric Hare, Kianta Yap, Plastic, Fernando Lopez Ojeda, Edward Lay, Dr. Kek, Daniel Un, Adi is here, and other patrons on Patreon for supporting this channel. Until next time, stay cool, my bros.